The disc went on a Tuesday. I remember that specifically because Tuesdays were the lightest shift at the warehouse. Shorter runs, fewer pallets coming off the dock, and I'd told myself for 3 weeks that if I could just get through the heavy days without seizing up, I'd be fine. Then I hit a patch of uneven concrete near the cold storage bay, overcorrected on the forklift, and felt something in my lower back give way like a hinge pin shearing off. 11 years of warehouse work ended in about 4 seconds. I had been at Pacific Rim Dry Goods since I was 27. Forklifts, inventory management, some light supervisory work in the last couple of years. Nothing glamorous, but it was mine. I knew the system, knew which pallets to pull first in a tight aisle, knew the building's particular smell. Cardboard and plastic wrap, and the faint chemical sweetness of bulk grain. You spend that long somewhere and the job stops being a job. It becomes the shape your day takes. When it was gone, the shape went with it. Workers' comp covered the L4, L5 surgery. They were clear about that. Surgical procedure, yes. Extended recovery time, no. By mid-April, I was walking again, technically, in the way that a man twice my age walks. Slow, forward-leaning, careful about where I put my feet. I couldn't lift anything heavier than a gallon of milk without the pain reporting back up through my spine like a signal I wasn't supposed to ignore. The physical therapist said 12 weeks. Workers' comp said 6. I ran out of money somewhere in between. I was living in a 1-bedroom in North Spokane, checking the state job board twice a day by then. Most of what came up was warehouse work or construction labor. The exact categories I couldn't touch. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I was looking for whatever fit the hole I was in. The Centerra Group posting appeared on a Thursday evening. Overnight security. Hanford Site Environmental Restoration Disposal Facility, Richland, Washington. The listing was sparse. Valid driver's license, clean background check, ability to patrol on foot and by vehicle, no heavy lifting. The pay was listed as a range that sat just below what federal workers made, but well above what the private security market in eastern Washington was offering. Graveyard hours, which suited me. I'd been running graveyard at the warehouse for the last 4 years, and my sleep was already built around it. Hanford. I knew the name the way most people in the region knew it. Vaguely, historically. The way you know about something large and institutional that's been present your whole life without ever touching it directly. The ERDF was a disposal site on the facility's grounds. I looked it up briefly before applying. Radioactive and hazardous waste, managed under environmental restoration programs, operational since the late 90s. The work was security, not remediation. I wasn't going to be handling anything. I drove out to Richland the following week, did the interview in a prefab office that smelled like fresh carpet adhesive and printer tone, and had the position by the time I got back to the parking lot. I started on a Monday. The drive out from Richland took 22 minutes along 2-lane roads that ran through scrubland and eventually gave way to fencing. The facility spread out in every direction under a sky that still held some early evening light when I arrived. The desert air was dry in the way Spokane wasn't. Sharper, cleaner, with a faint alkaline quality I couldn't identify but kept noticing. I parked in the designated lot, signed in at the gatehouse, and was directed to the security office to meet my shift supervisor. Susan Murray was waiting just inside the door. She had a badge in one hand and a laminated card in the other, and she held both out to me before I'd finished introducing myself. I took them. The badge was issue, photo already printed. They'd done that at the interview, with my name and Centerra Group identifier. The laminated card was the size of an index card. white with a block of text on both sides, small font, dense, the kind of thing formatted to fit a lot of information in a small space. Read that before your first patrol. She was already turning back toward the desk. Is there an orientation? Read the card first. She pulled a logbook toward her and opened it. The conversation was over. I looked down at the card in my hand. The text on the front began with a site map reference and a lot of numbered zones. I turned it over. The back started with a line of bold text that I read twice before I understood what it was telling me to do, and once more before I accepted that it said what it said. I looked up. Susan was writing in the logbook, her pen moving in steady, hurried strokes. I looked back down at the card. The front side was straightforward, a site map reference keyed to numbered zones, patrol checkpoints, building designations, institutional orientation material, formatting. The kind of thing you'd find taped inside any guard shack in the country. I flipped it over expecting more of the same. 5 rules. Plain typeface. No letterhead, no Centerra Group logo, just numbered lines. The first one said not to approach or radio in a color change in the retention basin after midnight. If I observed a color change, I was to use the landline in Building 6 instead. The second covered the waste processing wing. If the HEPA monitors showed negative pressure, I was to leave immediately via the east corridor. Third, never enter the east equipment shed if the padlock was facing inward. Fourth, if a man in a yellow dosimetry badge asked me for the 1987 containment logs, I was to say nothing and keep walking. Fifth, if I felt a low-frequency vibration coming from below the C-tank cluster, I was to return to the guard station and stay there. I read the list a second time, slower. The formatting was the thing that almost got me. No preamble, no explanatory header, no the following protocols are in effect under anything, just the rules, numbered, in the same font size throughout, the way you'd format a grocery list. Rule 4 in particular, say nothing and keep walking, sat in the same register as the others. The same flat administrative voice. As though responding to a specific person asking a specific question was an operational procedure alongside pressure monitoring and lock orientation. I looked up. Murray was still writing in the logbook, her back half turned still, unhurried. I thought, this is hazing. Experienced staff put something together for the new guy, laminated it for effect, slipped it into the onboarding materials. It was a reasonable conclusion. I'd seen similar things at Pacific Rim. Nothing so elaborate, but the instinct was familiar. You work somewhere long enough, you develop a local vocabulary of jokes that look serious until they don't. I pocketed the card. Murray didn't turn around. The first night, I ran the perimeter road twice before the shift ended. Logged both roads, checked the vault door seals on the east side of the main disposal cells, and confirmed the lock orientation on every outbuilding I passed. That last part wasn't on my official checklist. I noted it anyway. Old habits from inventory work. If something's supposed to be in a specific position, you check it every time until checking it becomes automatic enough that you'd notice the absence without looking directly. The east equipment shed padlock was facing outward. I wrote that down and kept moving. 6 nights passed that way. The facility was enormous and flat. A series of low structures and earthwork berms arranged across scrubland under a sky that went from deep cold blue to full black between the time I parked and the time I cleared the first checkpoint. The perimeter road was 2 miles of packed gravel. My back held up if I kept moving and didn't favor either side, which I'd learned to manage. I drank coffee from the vending machine in Building 6, which dispensed something hot and brown that had the texture of coffee, without any other qualities. I logged my rounds in the guard station logbook in the same column format Murray used. I checked the HEPA monitor readings in the waste processing wing on my way through, always positive pressure, always nominal, and confirmed the retention basin looked like a retention basin, which is to say dark and still and entirely without notable color. By night 4, I was running the perimeter on autopilot, cataloging the things that didn't change: the vault seals, the lock orientations, the HEPA readings. Nothing deviated from the previous night's log. Nothing deviated from the night before that. The card stayed in my jacket pocket. I stopped taking it out to reread it somewhere around night 3. By night 6, it had migrated to the same back corner of my awareness as the vending machine coffee. Present, noted, not requiring active attention. I had almost entirely stopped thinking about it. Night 7 started the same as the others. Perimeter run at 11, both laps. Back holding, which was the main thing. Vault door seals on the east side, all nominal. HEPA readings in the waste processing wing, positive pressure across the board. The vending machine in Building 6 dispensed another cup of something that approximated coffee. The basin was last on my route, always last, because it was the farthest point from the guard station and I preferred to walk back with something behind me rather than ahead. I came around the berm at 12:41 by my watch. The basin was amber, not lit from above, not a reflection from anywhere I could identify. The sky was overcast and flat black, no moon worth mentioning. And the nearest exterior light was 40 yards back toward the processing wing. The color came from the water itself, or from whatever was beneath the surface of the water. Rising up through it, the way heat shimmers off summer asphalt. Warm amber, even and steady at the edges, pulsing from the center outward. The smell hit me on the way back. I hadn't clocked it immediately. My brain had been occupied, but it was there and had probably been there for a few seconds already. The way a hospital smells when you get past the lobby and into the actual working floors. Beneath the bleach and the floor wax, the particular combination of iron and something I never had a word for. It was that smell, but outside in open desert air, which made it worse somehow. Things couldn't smell like that in open air. I kept my pace even. The card said don't approach and don't radio. It said use the landline in Building 6. I was already walking toward Building 6. Running would have felt like admitting something and I wasn't ready to do that yet. The Building 6 corridor smelled like it always did. That flat industrial smell of conduit and concrete and old ventilation. The landline was on the wall between the vending machine and a fire extinguisher mount. A beige handset on a beige cradle with a laminated card of its own taped beside it. Different card from mine. This one was just a phone number, handwritten in marker and the words, "After hours, use this line," printed above it in the same font as every other institutional label in this facility. I dialed the number. It rang. I counted because I was trying to stay organized and counting was something to do with my brain while I waited. 1 through 11. Then silence. Not voicemail, not a recording. The line just sat there open and quiet. The way a line does when it's connected to something that isn't picking up. I held the handset for another 10 seconds, put it back, and then just stood there. The right thing to do was wait. Log the attempt, wait for shift change, tell Murray. That was the procedurally correct action. The card said use the landline. I had used the landline. The card did not specify what to do when the landline was unanswered for 11 rings at 12:43 in the morning. I went back to the basin. I want to be honest about that decision, or at least accurate. It wasn't panic and it wasn't bravery. It was the same thing that used to make me recount a pallet I'd already counted twice. The specific, useless need to confirm what I'd already seen. I'd been operating on 6 nights of nothing, 6 nights of the log looking exactly like the night before. Some part of me had decided, somewhere around night 4, that the card was background noise, a formality, a test that was never going to be administered, so I went back. The amber was still there, stronger maybe. The pulse was the same rhythm, but the color had deepened toward the center, going from amber to something closer to orange gold, and the perimeter of the effect had widened. It covered most of the basin now. I stood at the fence line and looked at it and confirmed everything I'd already seen, which accomplished nothing and cost me approximately 2 minutes. The smell was stronger. I noticed I was breathing through my mouth. I pulled out my notebook, not the logbook, my personal one, the spiral-bound 3x5 I kept in my chest pocket, and I wrote down the time and a brief description. 12:46, retention basin, amber coloration, pulsing originated center, now basin-wide. Smell metallic organic, intensifying, landline unanswered, 11 rings. That was as far as I got. The pressure gauge on the waste processing wing exterior panel was mounted to a post about 30 yards from where I was standing. I could see the face of it from the fence line. I had a small flashlight. I used it. -14 pascals. 6 nights of nominal positive pressure. 6 nights of the same reading I had written in the same column in the same logbook. I looked at the gauge and the number looked back at me, and something in the procedural part of my brain went quiet in a way that wasn't comfortable. Rule 2. Negative pressure in the waste processing wing. Leave immediately via the east corridor. I moved. I was not running. I want that on the record for whatever it's worth. I was walking fast, which is a different thing, and I was keeping my back straight because I've learned that hurrying with bad form costs me more than hurrying slowly cost anyone else. The east corridor entrance was on the far side of the processing wing, 162 yards from the gauge post. I'd measured it on night 2 out of habit, pacing it off during my second perimeter loop. I passed the gauge post and glanced at it again on the way by. -22. That was 8 pascals of change in the time it took me to walk 30 yards. I revised my pace upward. The east corridor was narrow, wide enough for one person and a handcart. Institutional construction, cinder block walls painted over in industrial gray wire cage fixtures on the ceiling every 12 feet. 2 of the fixtures were out. The remaining ones were doing something I hadn't noticed before. A faint flicker at the edge of perception, the kind that registers in peripheral vision before the eyes confirm it. I kept moving. The exit was at the far end, approximately 80 yards, and I was halfway there. The vibrations came up through the floor. It started in my boots. That was the first I felt it. A low, even hum transmitted through the rubber soles and into the bones of my feet. The way you feel a semi passing on the highway from 200 yards out. Then it moved up through my ankles, my shins, settling somewhere around my knees for a moment before continuing upward. By the time it reached my jaw, I had slowed without meaning to because my body was responding to it before I'd consciously registered what it was. I felt it in my teeth, then in my sternum, the way a bass speaker resonates in your chest at a concert, except there was no sound, just the vibration traveling upward through concrete and bone. C-tank cluster, below grade. Rule 5. Return to the guard station and stay there. I stopped walking. East corridor. Rule 2. East corridor, exit immediately. Negative pressure in the waste processing wing. Already at -22 and climbing when I last checked. Guard station was behind me, back through the processing wing, past the gauge, back across open ground toward the main building. Past the retention basin, past the amber pulse in the water and the metallic smell in the open air and whatever was generating -22 pascals in a sealed building designed to run at positive pressure around the clock. East corridor exit was 40 yards ahead. That was Rule 2's answer. Get out via the east corridor. Except the vibration was still in my sternum, still rising in slow, even pulses from somewhere below the concrete I was standing on. And Rule 5 said return to the guard station, which meant turning around. 3 rules, all active, all pointing at different coordinates. I stood in the flickering corridor with the vibration moving through me and worked through it the same way I used to work through a pallet count that wasn't adding up. Methodically, starting from what I knew for certain and move outward from there. I knew what I'd seen in the basin. I knew what the gauge had read and what it was likely reading now. I knew what I was feeling through the floor. What I didn't know was which of the 3 things I was standing in the middle of was going to become the larger problem first. I was 40 yards from the east corridor exit when I remembered the shed. Not a dramatic realization, just a procedural tick. The same reflex that had me counting lock orientations on every outbuilding since night 1. A habit Murray hadn't asked for and the checklist didn't require. I'd logged the east equipment shed padlock as outward facing at 11:17. That was part of my first perimeter lap, 2 hours ago, give or take. I turned around, not because it seemed wise. The pressure gauge behind me still read -22 pascals. The vibration was still running through my sternum in slow, even pulses. Turning around meant going back through the processing wing, past the gauge post, across open ground, past the basin. None of it was a good idea. I turned around anyway because not knowing felt worse than the alternatives, and I have always been bad at leaving an unresolved count alone. The east corridor felt longer going the wrong direction. The 2 dead fixtures stayed dead. The one still working had settled into a faint irregular flicker that my peripheral vision kept registering and my central vision kept failing to confirm. I kept my pace steady and my posture upright, which cost me something in the lower back, but I needed the full visual field. I came out of the processing wing on the near side, crossed 30 yards of open ground to the gauge post, did not look at the gauge, and moved south toward the shed. The basin was in my peripheral line of sight. I didn't turn to look at it directly, the amber had been there. I'd confirmed it. Confirming it a 3rd time wasn't going to help anything. The east equipment shed is a low prefab structure, corrugated metal, gray-green in daylight and just gray at night. The padlock is a master, steel shackle, mounted through a hasp on a welded bracket. When I checked it at 11:17, the keyhole was facing outward, toward me, the way a padlock sits when someone had locked it from outside and walked away. It was facing inward. I stood there for a moment. I hadn't touched it. Nobody on my checklist had touched it. The official checklist didn't even include this shed. I was the only person who'd been logging it in my own notebook for 6 nights running. Because that's the kind of thing I do when I'm trying to stay useful. The keyhole was facing the door, and that's not how a padlock sits when it's been locked from outside. That's how it sits when someone is on the other side of it, holding it closed from within. I took a step back, then I looked up, because something in my peripheral vision had resolved into a shape, and my brain had been trying not to notice it for approximately 3 seconds. The man was standing at the far end of the tank cluster, maybe 60 yards out. Yellow dosimetry badge, dark clothing beneath it, or clothing that read as dark. He was completely still. Not the stillness of someone pausing mid-stride, but the stillness of someone who had been standing in exactly that position for a long time and intended to continue. He was standing under one of the perimeter vapor lights. The light was not on. The rest of the vapor light along that run were on. That one wasn't. He was standing in the dead spot of it, and I could still see him clearly enough to count the badge on his chest and the fact that his hands were at his sides. Rule 4. If a man in a yellow dosimetry badge asks for the 1987 containment logs, say nothing and keep walking. He hadn't asked me anything. He hadn't moved. He was 60 yards away and facing my direction, and he had not said a word. I didn't say anything either. I turned and walked toward the guard station. Not ran. Running felt like the wrong answer in a way I couldn't have explained and didn't try to. Some instinct about not changing the term of whatever was happening, not escalating the register of it. I walked at the same pace I'd been maintaining all night, which was faster than my usual patrol pace, but still a walk, still upright, still one foot in front of the other on packed gravel. I did not look back. The guard station is 700 yards from the tank cluster by my pacing. I know the number because I counted it on night 2 out of professional habit and wrote it in my notebook. 700 yards of open ground, 2 gate checkpoints with card readers I didn't need to swipe because I was already inside the perimeter. 1 short dog leg around the side of the processing wing. I walked all of it. My back made its usual objections. I filed them and kept moving. The guard station door is steel framed with a push bar handle. I went in, sat down behind my desk and did not move. The vibrations continued for 40 minutes. I know it was 40 minutes because I watched the clock on the station terminal the entire time. I didn't log anything during those 40 minutes. I didn't touch the radio. I didn't touch the landline, which I'd already established was going unanswered. I sat in the chair and kept my hands flat on the desk surface and watched the second hand and let the vibration do whatever it was doing to my sternum and my back teeth and the base of my skull. At 1:53 a.m. it stopped. The silence that followed was an ordinary silence. Ordinary silence is just the absence of input. This was something that pressed. I'm aware that's not a useful technical description. That's the most accurate one I have. The silence had weight and intention, and it lasted about 4 seconds before the ventilation system cycled on, and the fluorescents resumed their baseline hum, and the room returned to being a room. I exhaled, then I pulled up the monitoring terminal. The Centerra Group's remote monitoring system is functional rather than elegant. A grid of text readouts and 4 low-resolution camera feeds that refresh every 30 seconds. I'd used it twice before, both times to cross-check HEPA readings I'd already confirmed on foot. I navigated to the waste processing wing, HEPA panel readout first. Nominal, positive pressure, same numbers I'd been logging all week. I sat with that for a moment, negative 22 pascals at the gauge post, climbing. That had been real. My handwriting in my notebook was real. 40 minutes later, the remote system was showing nominal. Either the system was lagging badly or whatever had caused the drop had resolved itself. Or the remote readout and the physical gauge weren't measuring the same thing. I wrote down all 3 possibilities and did not pick one. The basin camera feed was dark water, still. No amber, no pulse, no color at all. Just black water under the perimeter light, same as it had looked on nights 1 through 6. I navigated to the east equipment shed feed. The camera there covers the approach path and the door hasp. The image was low res and shot through what looked like a moisture fogged lens, but the padlock was legible. It was facing outward. I leaned forward and looked at it for a long time. 30 seconds between refreshes. I watched it through 3 refresh cycles. Outward every time, keyhole toward me, the way it sits when someone has locked it from outside and walked away. I wrote 2:31 a.m., shed cam, padlock outward facing, confirmed 3 cycles. Then I wrote the 11:17 reading underneath it, outward facing, and drew a line between them with a question mark in the margin. The question mark didn't help. I left it there anyway. Murray came in at 6 on the dot, the way she always did. Door open, jacket still on, logbook already in her hand before she'd cleared the threshold. She glanced at the terminal, then at me, and something in her expression registered that I was still in the chair, and had been for a while. Roberts? Murray. I straightened up. My back had opinions about 4 hours in a desk chair, and I ignored them. I need to debrief. She pulled a chair from the corner, sat it across the desk from me, and sat down. just sat and looked at me and waited. I went through it in sequence. 11:17 padlock outward, 11:51 pressure gauge nominal, 12:41 basin amber, pulsing, center to basin wide, 12:43 landline, 11 rings, no answer, 12:46 return to basin. And here she shifted very slightly, just a small adjustment of weight, and I noted it and kept going. 12:51 gauge post, -22 pascals, east corridor, vibration, sea tank cluster origin. Transmitted through boots and up. Tank cluster, approximately 1:53 AM. Cessation, remote terminal, nominal readings, basin clear, shed padlock outward. Then, east shed padlock, inward facing, confirmed at approximately 1 AM. Man, yellow dosimetry badge, far end of tank cluster, beneath the non-functioning vapor light, stationary. Murray listened to all of it without expression. Not the expression of someone suppressing a reaction, the expression of someone who had organized their face around receiving information without returning any. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Did you get through on the landline? No. 11 rings, line connected, nothing picked up. She closed her eyes, not for long, 2 seconds, maybe 3. Then she reached into her jacket pocket and took out her personal cell phone, not the station line, and made a call. She turned slightly away from me while it rang. When someone answered, she said 2 sentences I couldn't fully make out. Something with a date in it and what sounded like a case reference number. And then she listened for about 30 seconds, said yes twice, and hung up. She put the phone back in her pocket and looked at me. Go home, she said. Come back tomorrow. The tone was even, the way she said everything, but underneath the even, there was something else. Not pity, not warning, more like the tone of someone reading from a list they had memorized and did not enjoy knowing by heart. The tone of someone who could tell you how many names had come before yours if you asked, and had decided not to offer that information unprompted. I didn't ask. I picked up my notebook, clipped the pen back through the cover spiral, and stood up. My back registered the movement with its usual complaints. I put on my jacket. Murray? She looked up. The card. The 5 rules. Did you write them? She held my eyes for a moment. Then she opened the logbook and picked up her pen. Drive safe, Roberts. The drive back to Richland takes 22 minutes on 2-lane roads through scrubland. I know this because I've made it 8 times now. In the early morning, the scrubland goes gray-pink, and the sky over the Cascades holds a thin, cold light that doesn't quite look right. I parked outside my building on the north side of Richland at 6:47 AM. Cut the engine. The apartment was right there, 30 feet away. I'd been awake for close to 20 hours, and my back was running a steady background commentary, and I had nothing left to usefully think with. I sat in the car for a long time. Not because anything was still happening, because something about going inside felt like closing a door on the night before I understood what the night had been. And I have always been bad at that, at filing something before the count resolves. The morning light came up the rest of the way. A jackrabbit crossed the parking lot at the far end and disappeared into the scrub beyond the curb. Eventually, I got out of the car and went inside.